Well, I want to welcome our members and our distinguished panel of experts for today's hearing focused on our large surface combatants and particularly our cruisers and destroyers. We have testifying before us the Honorable Sean J. Stackley, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Rear Admiral Thomas Rowden, Director of Surface Warfare Division, Office of the Chief of Naval Operations, and Rear Admiral Lawrence Creevy, Deputy Commander for Surface Warfare Naval Sea Systems Command. I want to thank each of the three of you for being here, for your service to our country, and also for your patience with us on these votes, and we're sorry for the delay in getting started with the hearing. Before we begin, I wanted to congratulate Rear Admiral Rowden on his selection as the next commander, Navy Surface Forces, and his assumption of command later this month. Admiral, we thank you for that service and for what you've done for our country. We've appreciated your advice and counsel, and I'm confident the Navy will be in good hands when you assume command. As to this hearing, I appreciate having received a copy of the 30-year shipbuilding plan. We continue to have reservations about the optimism that's built into this shipbuilding plan and believe that the administration is disingenuous in their sincerity to apply resources toward our nation's shipbuilding efforts. This year, I believe that our committee was able to provide additional resources to the shipbuilding account and start to change the negative shipbuilding trend lines. But revitalizing American seapower cannot be done in just 1 or 2 fiscal years. It will take a generational commitment from those sitting in this room today and others to follow. As to the administration's proposal to place 11 cruisers and 3 amphibious ships into a layup status, I continue to question how putting these ships into a long-term layup status improves our national defense. Let me be clear, the term phased modernization that has been used by the Navy to describe its 10-year plan is a misleading one that asks Congress to agree to take half of our cruiser fleet out of service with the hope that one day in the 2020s these ships will all be returned to our fleet. The Navy has indicated that a 306-ship Navy is required to meet combatant commander requirements. The last independent QDR indicated a force structure of 346 ships was required. Despite what number you choose, we're still significantly less than the force structure, both in terms of capacity and lethality, that we need to meet even the minimum requirements. That's why it's perplexing to me that this administration, one that has now produced a defense strategic guidance in QDR in the last 2 years that prioritizes seapower as a central enabler of our defense strategy, has proposed to lay up some of our most valuable and lethal surface combatants. With the decrease in available assets, we will undoubtedly increase our deployment times of our ships, burning out the sailors and ships that support our national security. I reject any notion that we should lock into place the negative consequences of sequestration and vigorously oppose any reduction of some of our most capable surface combatants to the altar of fiscal frugality. If the U.S. Navy needs more resources to meet its baseline requirements, then this Congress and Department of Defense should begin a serious discussion about how to rebalance the budget resources available to fully fund our national seapower priorities. I'm also concerned that the administration may already be placing some of these cruisers and amphibious ships into a layup status in contravention to congressional direction. I would note that the National Defense Authorization Act of fiscal year 2014 prohibited the retirement or layup of certain cruisers and amphibious ships. I would encourage our witnesses to carefully review the readiness ratings and deployment schedules of these ships to ensure that they continue to serve our nation. Taking action that impacts the fleet prior to final congressional direction should be rigorously avoided. With regards to the overall force structure of the Navy, I understand that the Navy has decided to continue and count ships that Navy has proposed to lay up for some cruisers that would not be readily available to deploy. I also understand that the Navy counts hospital ships and patrol ships as ships to meet our force structure. I consider these approaches as a mask to the true plight of our Navy and believe these efforts only serve to cover the true extent of the reductions in our Navy. Let's be honest today. According to the historical counting rules, in fiscal year 2015, the Navy will have just 274 ships in its fleet. This is an unacceptable figure that is the result of 2 decades of neglect. I'm fully committed, and I think most of the people in this subcommittee are fully committed to reversing this trend. As to our destroyer fleet, I believe that the Navy is on the right track with introducing an advanced radar on the next series of destroyers, also known as DDG Flight 3. I still have concerns with regards to the multiplicity of combat system suites on our destroyers. These varying capabilities have significant problems on the fleet's ability to properly train and support our sailors, and I hope that we'll be able to receive additional information on this important issue. And with that, I turn to my good friend and colleague, the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mike McIntyre, for any remarks he'd like to make. Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for holding this important hearing and for the continued excellent leadership you give us and the very valid and concerning points that you have raised. This is an important time for our cruiser and destroyer fleets, and critical that during these challenging budget times we find creative ways to ensure the Navy's entire fleet of large surface combatants remain relevant and reach their expected service lives. With regard to the remaining 22 guided missile cruisers in the fleet today, we continue the examination of what the most cost-effective plan is for modernizing these ships and ensuring that they will reach all of their expected service lives. The Navy has presented Congress with a phased modernization plan that would upgrade these ships with the latest technological advances in combat systems and maintenance improvements, while also reducing personnel on the ships and moving them to critically gapped billets. The Navy has estimated this plan would save $3.5 billion in the next 5 years and a total of $4.7 billion overall. We know the destroyer fleet continues its modernization, and upgrades are planned to reduce the workload and total ship class ownership costs and to provide enhanced warfighting capabilities. The Navy has continued its attempt to modify the modernization schedule in an effort to provide the greatest capability to the fleet. We know that we must ensure that we have the most capable and combat-relevant ships as possible and that they all reach their expected service lives. These are challenging times, given the fiscal environment that we're in. We know it is absolutely critical we find creative ways to ensure that we have a modernized and relevant fleet of large surface combatants and also provide flexibility when possible. And I do share the Chairman's concern that we have as many ships as necessary as well. I know that's an ongoing concern of our subcommittee as well as our full committee. Thank you to the witnesses for your service. Thank you for your commitment to our Navy, to our country's armed services and our national security. And thank you for your time today and for your patience with our delayed voting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congressman McIntyre. And now we'd love to hear your opening remarks. And as we have mentioned to you, we're going to give you all the last word at the end of all of this so that each of you will have an opportunity. If you have misstated anything or we haven't asked you a question you think is important, we will make sure you get time to put that on the record. So, Secretary, it's my understanding you're going to start off, and so we look forward to your comments.
Yes, sir. Chairman Forbes, Ranking Member McIntyre, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to address cruiser and destroyer modernization. And with the permission of the subcommittee, I propose to provide brief opening remarks and submit a separate joint statement for the record.
Without objection, all of your full statements will be made a part of the record.
Thank you, sir. Earlier this year, in testimony before this subcommittee, the Navy described how we had reshaped our shipbuilding, aviation, and tactical vehicle plans to reflect the priorities of the defense strategy as impacted by sequestration in fiscal year 2013 and constrained by the Bipartisan Budget Act in fiscal years 2014 and 2015. In total, the Navy Marine Corps budget request in the future years defense plan falls $38 billion below the level planned just 1 year ago and is further threatened by sequestration in 2016 and beyond. To minimize the impact of this reduced top line, we've leveraged every tool available to drive down cost. We've tightened requirements, maximized competition, and capitalized on multi-year procurements for major weapon systems. And we've attacked our costs of doing business from headquarters billets to service contracts so that more of our resources can be dedicated to making warfighting capability. In this context, in balancing resources and requirements, we've placed a priority on forward presence, near-term readiness, stability in our shipbuilding program, and investment in modernization and those future capabilities critical to our long-term technical superiority. In the end, however, the impact of a $38 billion reduction across the future years defense plan has real impact on our programs. These impacts are exacerbated when, as made clear in our shipbuilding report recently delivered to the Congress, you overlay the budget required to recapitalize the Ohio Sea-based strategic deterrent in the out years, and when you consider the effects of sequestration in 2016 and out. This subcommittee is keenly aware of these extraordinary challenges posed to Navy shipbuilding and modernization, and made most clear by this year's budget submission, which unfunded the 2016 refueling complex overhaul of the USS George Washington. We are today making every effort to replan near $7 billion required across the FIDUP to refuel the carrier, plus maintain its air wing, manpower, and support. We've released the balance of advanced procurement funding for 2014 to continue planning efforts in order to best maintain our options and retain skilled labor at the shipyard while we await determination by Congress regarding sequestration in 2016. Yet this also increases the pressure on other programs. With particular regard to Navy shipbuilding and fleet maintenance and modernization, we remain on track towards our objective for a 300-ship Navy by the end of this decade. In total, 43 ships are under construction across 8 ship classes in shipyards and weapons factories stretching across the country. Of equal importance to our plan is our ability to maintain and modernize the in-service fleet, to ensure each ship in the plan possesses those capabilities required by the combatant commanders, and to ensure each ship in the plan meets its expected service life. In fact, for many of our major combatants, more than merely meet the expected service life, which by itself is a reversal of past history, we need to extend their service life, and this is only made possible by rigorous planning and execution of both maintenance and modernization of these workhorse ships. With specific regard to the surface combatant force, the limitations of our budget have driven us to a dual-pronged approach to modernize both the Arleigh Burke destroyer and Ticonderoga cruiser classes. Across the 2015 to 2019 period, in total, the Navy has programmed $5.6 billion towards Aegis ship maintenance and modernization, which in this budget environment is a strong statement regarding our commitment to these ships. 18 DDG-51 destroyers are programmed for midlife modernization, including Flight 1, Flight 2, and Flight 2 Alpha ships. 8 of these ships will receive upgrades to combat capabilities, including ballistic missile defense, with the balance completing necessary hull, mechanical, and electrical system upgrades and repair to enable full, or in the case of the 2 Alpha ships, extended service life. Regarding the Ticonderoga class, the Navy has 22 Aegis cruisers, which are principally responsible for performance of air defense commander duties in support of our carrier battle groups. Today, the oldest 11 cruisers, CG 52 through 62, have been modernized and will deploy with carrier battle groups until their end of service, which commences in 2019. The Navy plans to modernize and extend the service life of the remaining 11 cruisers, CG 63 through 73, through an extended phased modernization program. And the elements of the program are that we will commence in 2015 with inspection, planning, and material procurement for repair and modernization of hull, mechanical, and electrical systems for all 11 cruisers. The work will be scheduled to ensure efficient execution and, to the extent practical, to provide critical stability to the industrial base. Once complete, the HM&E phase, these cruisers will be maintained in the modernization program until completion of their subsequent combat systems modernization, which will be aligned with the retirement of the first 11 cruisers. This Navy plan is made affordable by drawing down manpower and operating costs during the extended modernization period, a cost avoidance of $4.7 billion. Further, the Navy plan sustains the critical air defense commander capabilities of the cruiser force beyond its current retirement in 2029, well into the 2040s. The reality is that the Navy will be unable to recapitalize this critical capability throughout the period of construction of the Ohio replacement submarine, and without this phased modernization plan, we'll be unable to ensure our fleet possesses an air defense commander capability throughout the decade of the 2030s. This plan also retains flexibility, if needed, to accelerate completion of the modernization should the security demands dictate it, subject to funding and training of additional crews. Alternatively, if as directed by the House-passed version of the 2015 National Defense Authorization Act, we are precluded from executing this phased modernization plan, then the $4.7 billion costs otherwise avoided by the plan will be paid in the near term, depleting the ship's maintenance, operations, sustainment, and support fund and reducing resources for our fleet readiness, then reducing our force structure and its capabilities in the long term. In summary, in response to the cumulative impact of sequestration in 2013, the BBA level funding in 2014 and 2015, and the reductions across 2015 through 2019, the Department has been judicious in controlling cost, reducing procurements, stretching developments, and planning modernization. Many of these actions add cost to our programs and risk to our industrial base, and add risk to our ability to meet the requirements of the Defense Strategic Guidance. However, they represent the best balance of readiness, capability, and affordability for the budget in hand. The course set by our phased modernization plan is an example of the balancing act required by the fiscal environment. Absent an increase to our budget, changing this course will increase our costs and therefore a risk to the Navy and to the nation. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Secretary, thank you so much for your remarks. And Admiral, we look to you now for any comments that you'd like to offer.
Mr. Chairman, I have no additional remarks, sir, and standing by for your questions, sir.
Thank you. Admiral, do you have?
Mr. Chairman, I have no additional remarks either, and I'm standing by for your questions.
Good. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming and being with us today. I'm going to start, normally defer my comments until the end, but since basically we're here today challenging a provision of the defense authorization bill that was passed by the House, I'm going to start with a few questions and then hopefully come back with some at the end. Ms. Secretary, you can respond to this, or either Admiral can do it, so it's not trying to put anybody on the spot, so whoever wants to respond is okay. But we hear from time to time a concern we have with the Navy and our combatant commanders that in 2007 we were able to meet 90% of their requirements, and this year, is my understanding, we are going to meet somewhere less than 50% or somewhere in that area. And the pushback we always get is that our combatant commanders always ask for much more than they really need. But when I come today, I want to ask you guys, how many ships does the United States Navy believe, not that we want, not that our combatant commanders just think we need to have, but how many ships do we actually need in the United States Navy?
Yes, sir. Let me go ahead and start now. I'll turn to Admiral Rowden to add on to that. Not a simple question. There's not a number on a wall that you go towards. You referred to the 306 ship number that's associated with our force structure assessment that was completed at the end of 2012. That number has not changed. That force structure assessment is targeting a 2024 period of time. It's not saying that today we need 306. It's looking out ahead of 2024 and saying we need to build a force structure of about 306 ships, a balanced force structure that has 11 aircraft carriers, 88 submarines, 88 surface combatants, 33 amphibs, 29 auxiliary ships, and 33 support ships, right on down the line. And I don't want to leave out my Ohio class and Ohio class replacement, a dozen Ohio class replacement submarines, as well as the 4 SSGNs. So the force structure assessment lays that out. Today, in terms of how many ships that we require, we respond to the combatant commander's demand, as you highlighted. Today's force structure, by ship count, 289 by the current number counting, 283 by the previous ship counting rules that we had in place. Today's force structure produces about 100 ships on deployment consistently around the world. That's true today, that's true this year, and if you go back to 2007 and you look at the number of ships that the Navy had deployed, it was true in 2007. It's been very consistent, about 100 ships deployed, responding to combatant
Secretary, when your admirals come to meet with us, they tell us that when they look at this overall mix, it's not just the number of ships we have deployed. It's the number of ships we have ready in case we have a surge or we need those ships that are there. Is that an accurate statement, or the admirals misleading us when they tell us that?
No, 100 ships meet our presence requirements. The surge addresses major combat operations demands or events of the day where there's demand to increase the number on deployment.
So when I look at you telling me that you need 306 ships in the Navy, is that a figure that you have established from an analysis somewhere that has been done to say that's what's needed, or is that just something that we're basically pulling out of the air and saying we think that would be a good goal to push towards?
No, sir. That's a thorough analysis that went behind the force structure assessment that was conducted by the CNO, completed in December 2012 and delivered to the Hill.
So then if we said that we needed 306 ships, and that is the plan that you've at least submitted over to us, is that a fair statement in this 30-year shipbuilding plan? How many cruisers do we need?
Okay, so in that plan, we talk about, we don't break out cruisers separate from large surface
But there is a
combatants.
comment in here based on the 2012 assessment of the number of cruisers we need. Is that a fair statement?
Let me, yes, sir.
Please.
We break out 88 large surface combatants. Today, we have 22 cruisers. So in terms of how many we need, Air Defense Commander, that role, we need an Air Defense Commander with deploying battle groups. So if you assume 11 carriers, 11 carrier battle groups, 11 air defense commanders. Today we have 2 cruisers per carrier battle group, which gives us flexibility, gives us redundancy, it gives us the ability to adjust based on ship operating schedules, so we're not pegged to a 1-for-1 ratio.
When I look at your 30-year shipbuilding plan, and help me if I'm misreading it, there is an assessment that says that the 2012 assessment said we needed 22 cruisers. Is that incorrect?
In the 30-year shipbuilding plan?
Yes, sir.
88 large surface combatants, 22 cruisers, 66
But it did say
DDGs.
22 cruisers.
Yes, sir, but they go away. So
What do you mean they go away?
They retire over time.
So when it says that we needed 22 cruisers, what time period did we need the 22 cruisers for?
22 cruisers is what we have today. The force structure assessment was targeting a 2024 timeframe. Our CG-47 class starts to retire in 2019, and it is on a steady retirement path to the end of the 2020s decade. What we need to do is we need to recapitalize those ships with a future ship class, either an upgrade to a DDG-51, a Flight 4 type of ship, or a cruiser. We do not have the ability to do that during the period of construction of the Ohio replacement.
Well, you're talking about if you have the dollars that you currently have. But when we look at the 22 cruisers
Yes, sir.
that this assessment says that we have, why don't we just get rid of the 11 cruisers?
We need that air defense commander capability, which goes beyond.
Do we need all those 11 cruisers?
We need 11 cruisers pegged to our 11 carrier battle group.
I understand, but we have
sir.
22 now, and you say we need 11. Why don't we just get rid of those 11 cruisers?
2019 will be down to 10.
Okay.
2020 will be down to 9. 2021, and by 2026 we'll be done. We need to sustain that cruiser capability, that air defense
But
commander
why put
capability.
them in the layup and hope that you're going to modernize them? Why not just get rid of these 11 cruisers?
Sir, we can't afford to get rid of the cruiser.
Well, last year, you came in with a proposal to get rid of 7 cruisers.
Yes, sir.
Why were you going to say that we could get rid of 7 cruisers, but this year you say we couldn't get rid of those cruisers?
2 things. At no point in time has the Navy wanted to get rid of our cruisers. Last year, when we were getting rid of 7, when we had proposed to decommission early 7 of the 22 cruisers, in our plan, there was a future flight destroyer that we had anticipated would be able to recapitalize that capability. You don't see that in this year's 30-year plan, because we know we cannot afford to recapitalize those cruisers during the period of the Ohio replacement.
When you look at the this thing you called a phased modernization, and by the way, Congress is not prohibiting you from doing modernization. What we're doing is prohibiting you from doing the layup, because there are no funds in this 30-year plan, and you don't have any projected funds to do the build-out that you need in this 30-year plan, do you?
The budget requirements that go with that 30-year plan, when you look at, again, the period of the 2020s through about 2034, that exceeds any shipbuilding budget that we have seen since the
And that would be
1980s.
true even if you didn't have the Ohio-class replacement, isn't that correct?
It exceeds what we have budgeted over the last 10 years during that period, but it does not reach the level that we reached back in the buildup of the 1980s.
But I understand, I wish we were back in the
Yes, sir.
1980s, but I'm talking about over the last 20 years when we have cut down our ships so far. In the 80s, we built them up to 600 and some ships. We've been taking them down. And what I just want to ask you is, I'm looking at a 30-year shipbuilding plan, and I'm asking you that based on the dollars you've had over the last 20 years, can you build this 30-year shipbuilding plan?
No, sir. And
Can you do the modernization of these cruisers with the dollars that you have and still meet this shipbuilding plan that you have submitted to Congress based on the dollars that you've been allocated over the last 20 years?
The key to us being able to modernize those 11 cruisers is that as we have laid out in our plan, which allows us to reduce the manpower, pull them out of operation and sustainment during an extended modernization period so that we can replace one for one the first 11 cruisers.
But, Mr. Secretary,
as
my
they-
question is the dollars. Do you have the dollars to do that? And can you certify to this committee that you have the dollars, if you get the same dollars you've had over the last 20 years per year, can you do that modernization and do this shipbuilding plan that you've submitted to Congress?
That plan, with the letter that accompanies it, certifies through the fit-up. It does not portend to certify budget levels outside of the fit-up.
I
sir.
understand, and your modernization goes outside the fit-up.
Yes, sir.
So what my question to you is, can you tell us that based on the dollars you've had over the last 20 years, well then, if the Navy got the same dollars, and you're suggesting they may get less, but if they got the same dollars they had, can it do that modernization and also do this 30-year shipbuilding plan?
The only way we could execute that shipbuilding plan and the modernization that's in that plan that modernizes those cruisers, the only way we can do that, assuming that we have the same budget that we had in the last 20 years, is prioritizing that modernization of those ships and that construction over the rest of our budget.
So, Mr. Secretary, I don't want to argue with
Yes,
you.
sir.
I just want to find out.
We're actually we're in strong agreement here,
Yeah,
sir.
but I just want to make sure we're clear. If you have the dollars you had over the last 20 years, and you know, I've asked the Secretary, I've asked you, do you have any scintilla of hope of where you're going to get additional dollars? You know, so if we assume you're going to get the same amount of dollars you've had over the last 20 years, and let's say we can hold that and you don't decrease, my question is, would you have enough dollars to do the modernization that you're talking about and do this shipbuilding plan that you have submitted to this Congress?
As stated right in that report, sir, as laid out clearly in that report, the funding requirements over the period of 2020 through 2034 exceed the budget that we have had for the last 30 years.
Then why would you suggest to us that we should have a confidence level when the Navy came in and told us last year it wanted to get rid of 7 cruisers? This year it now says it wants to have this phased modernization, which means laying them up until you can get more dollars to come back and do the modernization. If you don't have the dollars necessary to do that modernization and to do this shipbuilding plan, give me the comfort level of how you're going to build these ships and do that modernization and take those ships out of layup.
Yes, sir. So it starts with the funding that we have in hand. We have approximately $2.2 billion that's been set aside, and we brought more money inside the fit-up to go towards the modernization plan. And rather than sit on the ships, our proposal is that we commence in 2015 with the execution of that modernization program. And we get through the HM&E upgrades that are required to extend the service
But,
life.
Mr. Secretary, you don't have the money to do that. You wouldn't have the money to do this plan you've submitted to us and do that modernization. Isn't that a fair statement?
We have the funding in the fit-up to
I'm talking about the 10-year period of time that you've talked about this phased modernization, this phraseology that y'all brought in here. Really what you're talking about that you can guarantee us is you can lay them up, but you can't guarantee to me today that you can do the modernization and put them back out again, can you?
I can tell you what the requirement is.
I know what the requirement is.
For the balance of the work in the next fit-up, the 2020 through 24 fit-up. I can't certify what a future Congress or Department
But
of
what you
Defense is
can
gonna
tell
do
me
in
is
that period of
based on
time.
the last 20 years, if you get those same dollars, you can't meet this plan, can you?
There's 2 parts, sir.
Okay.
The shipbuilding program, that report talks to the budget requirements for the shipbuilding program as opposed to the modernization program. We don't try to look back over the past and project in the future, specifically the modernization program. As it relates to the cruisers, the funding requirement inside the fit-up for the cruiser modernization program is about $3.5 billion. And that is, most of that funding is in hand, and the balance is in our program plan. The remainder outside of the fit-up is about $5.3 billion. We know that as the requirement. I cannot certify to you today that a future department, a future Congress is going to lay that money in, but our program plan for executing it as it's laid out is only made affordable if during this period we're able to reduce the costs associated with manpower and operating the cruisers during the phased modernization period so that we can pay the balance. Otherwise, we've just doubled the reach.
Mr. Secretary, last thing I'll just ask you before I turn it over to Mr. McIntyre is this. When you're looking at the number of ships that the Navy requires, their requirements, we're talking about the number of ships that are capable of being deployed. Isn't that correct? Not the number of ships that are laid up.
We're talking about the number of ships that the Navy needs in order to produce what we have historically deployed with, which is about 100 ships on deployment.
And when we took our missile defense systems out of Europe and put them on the back of the Navy, can you tell me if the Navy even knows what the requirements are today that we need to do the missile defense capabilities that the country needs?
We get our requirements from the combatant commanders.
Do you all I'm asking is, do you know those requirements today of what we need for that BMD capability? Does the Navy know that?
We know what the demand is today, and we're meeting today's demand. But sir, we don't look at just today's requirements, today's demand. We've got to meet an increasing demand over the next 5,
and
10,
Mr. Secretary, my time is I just don't want to take up any more time, but my point is I understand that. But you come in here when you talk about combatant commanders' requirements, and on the one hand you say we don't listen to them because they're too big. You were meeting 90% of them in 2007. We're meeting less than 50% this year. And you say, well, that's because they asked for everything. Then on BMD, my question is this: does the Navy know what our BMD requirements are today? I understand we need to look at them tomorrow, 5 years from now. Do you know what they are today?
We know how many ships we need on station in the Sea of Japan. We know how many ships we need on station in the Mediterranean, and we know what we need to accompany our carrier battle.
Do we have a gap in our BMD requirements today?
I wouldn't say we have a gap today. What I'd say is we have a very stressed force trying to meet the
Let me ask you this, and I want you to be very clear about how you answer this. Can we meet the BMD requirements we have today?
Sir, we can put the ships on station where they're required with BMD capability. But you know as well as I do that I don't want to go classified here.
I don't
you
want
know
you.
well as I do what the threat is and where we need to be heading.
And
so it's not a simple matter of.
But when we pull these cruisers out, some of them have BMD capability
Yes, sir.
on them.
Yes,
and
sir.
when they're laid up, we'll have less of those requirements met, not more. Isn't that true?
Four of the cruisers have the earliest baseline of BMD capability. That's correct, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. And Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of brief questions. What is it, if you can, just so that we're all on the same page here, the difference between a cruiser and destroyer in the important roles they play within the carrier strike group, and after you delineate those differences in their role, what would be the impact to that carrier strike group if there were no cruisers available to fill the air defense or air warfare commander role?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. I'd be happy to address this. Today, our cruisers are commanded by a captain with a more senior staff on the ship and more individuals dedicated to the planning and execution of the air defense mission for the carrier strike group. In addition, the physical plant on our cruisers allows for dual transmitters, one forward and one aft, adding redundancy to those ships and a greater number of cells available for surface-to-air missiles for the execution of the air defense mission. In addition, they have an increased command and control capability over the guided missile destroyers. The guided missile destroyers are commanded by a commander with a less experienced, though perfectly capable staff underneath that commanding officer to ensure that they can execute the missions that have been assigned to that ship. And typically, for carrier strike groups that we are deploying, the air defense commander role will be assigned to the cruiser commanding officer associated with the cruiser that's going to be deploying for that ship. And so that's really how we how we drive that, drive the requirement for the cruisers and the air defense commander on the ship. The guided missile destroyers will typically operate in support. All of these ships are multi-mission ships capable of executing air defense, capable of executing anti-submarine warfare and anti-surface warfare as well. However, and typically we will deploy more destroyers, anywhere from 3 to 5, typically with a carrier strike group at this time. Given the threat that we have currently experiencing today and the way we're deploying our ships, typically we will keep the cruiser with the aircraft carrier, and we have the luxury of being able to send those destroyers off on other missions. But we always keep the air defense commander ship with the aircraft carrier operating in that air defense commander role.
All right, and so what is the second part of the question was, what's the impact to the carrier strike group if there were no cruisers available to fill the air defender commander role?
Yes, sir. The air defense commander, Alpha Whiskey, assigned to the air defense commander, the secondary role or the secondary commander, the redundancy within the strike group, is assigned to typically the most senior commander on a guided missile destroyer.
So that's where it would go if you didn't have a cruiser? You would go to that most senior commander on a destroyer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and what is your comfort level with that? Because you mentioned a minute ago you had less experienced staff on those destroyers.
Yes, sir. Typically, the department heads, the supporting staff on a cruiser will be second tour department heads, whereas they will be first tour department heads on a guided missile destroyer. And as a consequence, we leverage the experience that those department heads have learned typically in their DDG command as they execute their responsibilities in the air defense commander. Obviously, if the role falls of the air defense commander to a guided missile destroyer, we would have to increase the amount of training that we have and perhaps start to increase the level of expertise on those guided missile destroyers in order to be able to get the capability into those ships in order to be able to ensure that we are executing the air defense commander job properly.
All right, thank you. I think that's an important distinction to keep in mind, and I'm glad that you've stated that. I want to make sure we have that on the record in terms of what would need to be done. Could the reduced modernization of the Flight 1 and 2 destroyers be a precursor to early decommissioning of some of these vessels?
No, sir, I don't believe that is the case. The Flight 1 and 2 guided missile destroyers are, given the fact that they are ballistic missile defense capable ships at this time, are some of the most stressed ships that we have in the inventory. They are playing a vital role across the force in the execution of the ballistic missile defense capability. And I believe you're referring to the phase modernization and, the accelerated modernization of our Flight 2A DDGs.
Yes, sir.
And understanding that the plan that we are executing is designed to increase our ballistic missile defense capacity and increase our ballistic missile defense capability as we proceed through the remainder of the decade. By ensuring that we maintain the relevance of the guided missile destroyers, by upgrading their ballistic missile defense capability, commensurate with the capability that we'll be installing in the Flight 2A DDGs. So I think that those ships will remain as vital as they are now, given the modified destroyer modernization plan that we have.
Would you agree with that assessment, Mr. Stackley?
Absolutely, sir. We're investing on average over $100 million per ship in the Flight 1s and 2s to modernize them. That's not a precursor to decommissioning them. We're bringing up Chairman Forbes made reference to the number of baselines that we're managing. Too many. One of the things, and this reflects a 30-year build program across Aegis, that's just the evolution of the technology. But to the extent practical, we need to raise the earlier baselines for both the cruisers and destroyers up to get them to a position where they're not just more capable, but we can continue to upgrade them through the balance of their service life. And that's what we're able to do with the Flight 1s and Flight 2s. But it comes at a price, and that price is not a precursor to decommissioning them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Conway is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stackley, in the written document, your testimony, you talked about the phase modernization plan for the CGs precludes the Navy from having to increase overall end strength by about 3,400 people, which would otherwise be required to fill the critical shortfalls in our training pipelines and fleet manning of the cruisers. Can can you walk us through what that actually means in the real world, and what are the risks, and how long does it, if you had to actually have those 3,400 people, how long could you take you to get them into place?
Yes, sir. So today, a cruiser has about 330 to 340 officers and enlisted as part of the ship's complement. In this phased modernization plan, recognizing that the first 11 are going to start decommissioning about 2019, the intent is that we sustain a steady state, steady flow of 11 ships worth of manpower dedicated to cruisers out to the retirement of the last cruiser. What that means is for the second 11 that go into phase modernization, you pull the 330, 340 per ship off, and you're reducing the manpower requirement by about 3,400. Then when CG 52 retires and CG 63 replaces it, you actually keep a steady cruiser manpower in there. The savings per year associated with those manpower reductions, or it's a cost avoidance, is what helps to fund or fuel the cruiser modernization. I don't know if that, does that address?
No, it does, but what the risks associated with that, though,
Okay.
are assuming that for some reason you decided you can't
Yes, sir.
you can't
So if
decommission one of those cruisers, then you've got another you actually have spare 340-man crews just handy to come into out of the ether and just put them in place. How much risks are we taking by
yes, sir. So
reduction in manpower?
So if we're in the execution of the modernization program and we have reduced the manning on those ships, and we determine at some point in time that we need to accelerate those ships out of modernization and get them back to the force, well then if you say halfway through and maybe we have 5 cruisers that we're going to attempt to accelerate out, then we have to produce 1,500 to 1,700 trained sailors to man those ships. Some of those will come out of shore billets, some from other portions of the Navy, and some are going to have to be trained to take over their respective responsibilities.
Assuming you don't come from a standing start with hull 330 or 340, what would be the normal training time to get up from scratch kind of thing, where you start taking from other surface ship folks and put it together? How long would it take the crew together?
We don't have an exact answer, but our estimate is about 2 years. And Tom, you want to go ahead?
Yes, sir. One of the important parts of this plan is when we reduced the manning on the ships, we didn't take all 340 billets and eliminate them from the force. And so in order to be able to execute a reconstitution, should it be required, we actually retained their 35 most senior billets on the ship and distributed them throughout the Navy. So in the event that we have to return the ship to combat operational status.
I got that, but those folks with those skill sets, 4 years into this deal, they're not automatically going to step back into the role they would have had on that ship the day they came off of it. I mean, how do you keep refreshing that second term or second tour guy that needs to go in there that when they've moved off to other career paths?
Yes, sir. The career paths are still executed for the enlisted men and the officers, and they maintain their rotation from sea to shore. And so obviously there would be a time that we would have to reform the crew, get the crew trained, and get the crew out to sea. However, what we wouldn't, the plan as we've laid it out, since we've retained the billets, the men and women that man those billets are distributed to other areas, whether it's regional maintenance centers or within the afloat training group or other areas on the waterfront. We would then pull those people into the ship. The remainder of the crew, we would be able to form them in a relatively short period of time through new accessions in order to be able to form the crew and then get that ship out.
So if some terrible thing happened and we had to put those boats back in the water, it's a 2-year window. So I mean, the risks are that we really, the lack of flexibility or whatever is a 2-year window to get that team back in place. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, sir, I'd agree with Mr. Secretary. 18 months to 2 years.
Okay, thank you, guys. There you go back.
Mr. Courtney, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stackley, we've certainly heard a lot of the challenges that exist with implementing the plan that the administration suggested, but let's talk about for a second, if we go with the House defense authorization bill, which, again, your testimony, I just want to make sure I got this clear, is that the difference in terms of cost, if we don't do the phased modernization and just sort of keep the entire 22 cruisers operational, is about $10 billion altogether? Is that sort of your analysis?
No, sir. The difference in cost is about $4.7 billion. Specifically, absent the ability to deman the ships for this extended period and take them out of the operational cycle and use those savings or cost avoidance to go towards funding the program, it's about a $13.5 billion program to modernize the cruisers. Through this phased approach, it's about an $8.8 billion program, the delta being about 4.7.
All right. And that 4.7, if it's an added cost that the Navy has to absorb, is just going to, it would seem to me, put even more pressure in terms of trying to achieve the shipbuilding plan with historic levels of spending as we've been sort of using as a baseline.
Yes, sir. The CNO in his testimony was very clear. The reason we're doing this is because of the budget. The reason we're doing it is because of the budget. And given that, given that it's a constraint for us, given that this approach seems to be the right balance in terms of holding on to that force structure, getting those ships modernized, getting additional service life on those ships, sustaining 11 air defense commander-capable ships beyond the current plan out into the 2035 to 2041 timeframe. So this is trying to strike the best balance with what's a difficult budget environment.
And when we talk about the budget, I mean, we're again, using, as the chairman said, sort of historic levels of shipbuilding as the budget. Again, the Budget Control Act, which creates a whole separate level of pressure. I mean, the good news about that is it just expires by law in 2021. So, historic levels of spending in shipbuilding over the last 20 years or 30 years, as you alluded to, I mean, the fact is that there's a whole range of programs that are going to be challenged in the next throughout the whole 30-year shipbuilding plan. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. The 2020, I'll keep stating it, the 2020 through 2035 time frame when the Ohio replacement comes along, we're still building a carrier every 5 years. We've got to recapitalize the LSD-41 class. We're building big deck amphibs, 4-year centers. We're trying to sustain 2 Virginia classes per year, the destroyers. That budget requirement during that period of time and that major recapitalization, the last time we saw those types of budgets was during the 1980s. And so to be able to certify that we're going to be able to hit those numbers, no. What that report does, that report defines the problem, makes it black and white for everybody to see. We today can't make the decisions that's going to change that, but today we have to start taking the actions, making the effort to address it so that's not it's not beyond everybody's reach when we get out there.
Well, certainly it's an additional reason, Mr. Chairman, why our effort to have the deterrence fund set up in the defense authorization bill is even more underlined and I think highlighted by the testimony that we're hearing here today. I guess the other question is, you talked about the fact that if this phase modernization plan was adopted, that the availability of these cruisers would actually get pushed out into the 2030s.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? So,
yes, sir.
As opposed to if we go with the status quo or the House bill version, talk to me about that for a second.
Yes, sir.
I mean, when do we lose those cruisers if we just continue along with the House bill,
yes, sir.
and figure out a way to come up with the $5 billion?
Yes, sir. So today the service life, the expected service life of the cruisers is 35 years. They start aging out in 2019. And they will age out at the same rate at which we built them. So by the late 2020s, they're all retired. What this plan does is, one, through the modernization, we're going to do the necessary hull mechanical electrical repairs and upgrades to buy back some additional service life, buy back an extra 5-year service. And frankly, during that period, this phase modernization, this extended period when they're out of the operational cycle, we're not burning up the service life. So what that does, that gives us the ability to extend the cruiser class out into the late, as I was saying, 2035 through 2041 timeframe, during which they would then retire.
Thank you, Mr. Stackley. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. Mr. Whitman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stackley, Admiral Rowden, Admiral Creevy, thank you so much for joining us today. Secretary Stackley, I want to talk about the 11 cruisers that would be assigned minimal caretaker crews versus full crews during the reduced operating status. So now you have 11 of those ships. The question would be is if you have a contingency and they need to be brought back up to full operational status, the question is how many of those 11 ships and how quickly could they be brought back up? And if the answer is less than 11 could be immediately brought back up, should all 11 be counted in the FY15 30-year shipbuilding plan as fully capable ships available for duty?
Yes, sir. So clearly the number depends on where you are in the modernization plan. But first, the way we have this structured is we want to go after the HM&E package first. We want to hit it hard. A couple of things. We have to inspect the heck out of these ships. They've been driven. They're at a stage in their life that we're going to uncover a lot of things when we do open and inspect. So step one, get in, open, inspect, assess the material condition, get material in order, get them into the depot to do the hull mechanical and electrical upgrades that give you the service life that you need to get it out to 40 years. At that point in time, when those ships are in a depot, it's just like any other ship that's in a depot. It's not available for tasking. It's going to depend on how fast can you complete that work and get it going again. So in the early phase, when they're going through depot maintenance, maybe half will be materially available to get them going again, maybe half. Now, the issue then is not their material condition or their readiness. The issue is going to be the crew, and it's what we just discussed. It's going to be pulling the senior enlisted and officers from other shore billets and then bringing in the balance crews and getting them trained and integrated onto the ship. So I put out a 2-year estimate there, and that's based on new construction experience. If you look at what we do today in terms of crew phasing and training, integrating the crew with the ship, getting them certified and ready for deployment, about 2 years. After the HM&E upgrades, now you have ships that are in a very good material condition. They don't have the most current combat system baseline, which we want to ultimately get to, but they're in very good material condition. And then it becomes a matter of strictly the crew. And the first one will be ready for operations faster than the last one because we'll be surging crews to the ships. But I think the 18 months to 2-year rule still applies. And then the next phase going into the combat systems modernization, when now you're already in the active phase of bringing the crews to the ships. And so, again, depending on where you are, some of the ships are already going to be out on deployment. By 2019, the first of the cruisers are back out on deployment, and we have crews that are surging and moving to the ships, just like in new construction, so they'll be able to complete their certifications and ready for tasking faster.
Well, it still appears then through phase modernization that there wouldn't be all 11 ships that would be battle force ships available at that particular time. You'd be having them available in this wave status. But let me ask you, let me go to your question concerning crews, and that's a concern. Today, we're in a very, very high operational tempo. We're pushing things in significant areas, and I know the combatant commander requests have been significant. How do you expect to maintain the same forward presence with fewer assets? And would you expect to come back in future years and announce additional FD&F assets as a way to achieve that?
Yes, sir. I'm going to start this and ask Admiral Rowden to finish it. But first, you hit on the forward deployed ships. That's a very important key to the Navy's ability to sustain presence without driving our ships at the same op tempo, because we get to cut down on a lot of the transit time to theater. So the FD&F ships are an important point to increase our operational availability of ships, and that frankly helps us to compensate for cruisers being pulled out. But the high op tempo issue today, I am certain, and I think you are too, that 10 years from now it'll be worse. And it'll be more demanding. And an important part of this is where is the risk? Is the risk higher in the 2020s or today? And when we look at not just the budgets associated with recapitalizing and modernization, but we look at the risk associated with the threat, part of this, what this plan does is it accepts more risk today in terms of cruisers that are operationally available today, but then it buys down the risk in the out years when, frankly, the threat is increasing, both in terms of the fiscal threat and in terms of the adversary.
Yes, sir. And to piggyback on Secretary Stackley's comments, clearly, to get increased forward presence with X number of ships, you either forward deploy those ships or you increase the length of deployments, and that has and certainly the funding available to execute those would be required in order to ensure that we maintain the readiness levels on those ships, and certainly ships are built to put X amount of water underneath the keel. And the more you're operating those ships, the more you have to fund those appropriately in order to ensure that you can maintain the material condition as you bring those ships back to depot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman. Mr. Langland is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony today. Secretary Stackley, if I could just start with you, going back to the shipbuilding program and our ability to meet our shipbuilding needs. With the actions that the HASC has taken with respect to Ohio replacement and the subsequent action that the SASC has taken in terms of moving to take the Ohio replacement program out of the shipbuilding budget and treat it as more of a national platform with a separate funding mechanism, what will that do to the 30-year shipbuilding plan, and will it still leave a gap? Or to what degree does it significantly close that gap to help us meet our shipbuilding needs?
Yes, sir. Let me first say that the actions taken by both the HASC and the SASC in that regard, I'm calling it a great first step. By establishing the Strategic Sea-Based Deterrent Fund, we're creating a vehicle to help us finance our shipbuilding program during that extremely stressing period. It does not change the picture in terms of dollars required for constructing new ships during that period. So the fund is a great first step. One, it identifies, hey, we've got a problem here. It starts to set up a framework. We still have this, the dollar demand is unchanged. And that's where I think we need to work together to identify how can we, in fact, not just identify the fund, but fill the fund without it coming out of shipbuilding.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. Admiral Rowden, if I could turn to you. As you may know, I've been a very vocal proponent of ONR's solid-state laser technical maturity program that plans to test a high-powered, mature, integrated weapons system at sea in late 2016. My question is, what impact will the testing of this laser weapon system on the USS Ponce this year and this subsequent solid-state laser test in 2016 have on surface combatant modernization? And is the integration of high-energy weapon capabilities planned already with Ponce and SSL TM informing final decisions, or are the Ponce and the SSL TM being used as development gates?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. I think to answer your second question first, I think we really have to wait to see what the results of the testing that we have that we're going to execute on Ponce is in order to understand how to further integrate that into the future weapon systems. But I do think, and I'm not an expert by any means on this particular weapon system, but I can say in general, in the development of weapon systems, certainly the at-sea testing that we execute for any weapon system that we're going to go field is going to be absolutely essential to understand exactly what it is we have to do. And so I think that certainly it's a good first step to get the weapon systems out on ships like Ponce in order to be able to understand not only what needs to be done to marinize the equipment and to properly support it in execution of operations at sea, but then also to understand how to start develop the tactics, techniques, and procedures and the concept of operations in order to go employ those weapons effectively.
Okay, thank you, Admiral, for that answer. And I again want to applaud the Navy for the aggressive work that they're doing to try to get this directed energy weapons systems out of the lab and actually into the field. So with that, let me just turn to Admiral Creevy with the destroyer modernization plan combining two modernization periods into one, what's the opportunity cost in terms of hull mechanical and electrical or system upgrades? And other than conducting the combat system upgrades near the end of the availability, how will the Navy ensure that these destroyers are ready to rapidly integrate the latest technologies, particularly those in support of electronic warfare and high-energy weapons?
Thank you for the question, sir. To answer your second question, the second part of your question first, I think Admiral Rowden's got it right. We're going to learn a lot when we go do this at-sea test, and that's the benefit of getting it out there to test, so we can learn about the integration challenges, the power challenges, and those kinds of things that we need to do. In the meantime, we've put into our modernization program as much as possible in the way of upgrades to support future requirements. And combining those availabilities into one saves us a significant amount of time in modernizing those ships and keeps them from being offline for much less time.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I have some other questions that I'll submit for the record, but thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield that.
Mr. Langland, thank you for your work on this and on the funding source, too. You've done a great job on that. Mr. Courtney has as well. Mr. Courtney, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to thank the witnesses for your great testimony here today. Secretary Stackley, I think one of the reasons why I think there was resistance to the proposal from the administration was, to some degree, given the proposal a year before, which was to just decommission 7 ships. Frankly, I just think a lot of people, had some confidence issues about whether or not this, phased modernization was just a decommissioning by another name. And again, I think your testimony today has been very, I think, convincing in many respects. But I guess I thought, before you leave, that if you could just kind of walk us through, A, what changed, and B, what reassurances can you really state for the record that, the Navy really will sort of follow through on this different type of approach?
Yes, sir. A couple of things have changed that are critical here. First, the Congress established the Ships Maintenance, Overhaul, and Sustainment Fund, SMOSF. You all put $2.2 billion into a fund to let us move forward past the budget hurdles that we had to modernize the cruisers. So that was the first key. Second is the manpower issue. The SMOSF fund will be consumed by manpower, operation, and support faster than we can modernize these cruisers, particularly in this budget environment. So we coupled the two. We looked at the funding that we have in hand, and we want that money to go towards the modernization to give us the capability and extend the service life that we need on the cruiser. We didn't want to run out of gas along the way. And so we looked at the other costs, the manpower and the operation and sustainment costs. And we looked at the phasing of the decommissioning of those first 11 cruisers. And we arrived at this plan. We arrived at this plan that says, hey, we can minimize, we can almost self-finance this plan, at least on the front end, by pulling the manpower off and recognizing that we're going to bring our cruiser force structure down to 11, 1-for-1 with our carriers, but then be able to extend that longer. So the key was getting the SMOSA funding in place and then looking at the offloading the costs associated with manpower and operating and support during the period of modernization, and then coupling the decommissioning of the first 11 with the completion of the modernization for the back 11. And it just balanced out in terms of the budget that we've got, the force structure that we've got, and then the requirement that we've got to modernize the cruisers.
Secretary, let me take you back, because you left out one very important item when Mr. Courtney said what changed. What changed was Congress said you couldn't do it. In other words, when you came over here, you fought us tooth and nail with that, and when we tried to put the provision in there, Navy still came over here and fought us tooth and nail to try to decommission those 7 cruisers. And what really changed was when Congress looked at it and said, that's a crazy proposal to do. We've got useful life left on these cruisers. And then Congress said, Navy, you can't do that. and we put the fund in. But you could have come over initially, instead of saying, we're just going to cut these cruisers out, and said, hey, we need the cruisers, and we just need the funds to do it. And I'm not faulting you. I'm just saying we need to compare apples to apples. And when you guys come over here and you basically salute and say, this is all we need, this is good, and then on the other hand, you come back over and say, this is because of the budget, we need to know which is which. Are you doing this because of the budget, or are you doing it because of the needs? And basically, the reason those cruisers are still floating today is because the United States Congress said, we're not going to let you do it. Now, I come back and I want to ask you this question, because I had a hard time getting it. I want to make sure everybody else could get their questions in. Based on this report and what I understand you say, and any of you guys can answer, so I'm not putting any one person on the spot, on this shipbuilding plan, which I'm holding up here, Mr. Secretary, you tell me this is the number of ships we need in 2024, 306 ships. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, sir.
And I take it when you say we need 306 ships, you're not talking about 50 ships that are laid up in dry dock and we can't use, that you need 306 ships that could be deployed. Is that a fair statement?
Sir, we need 306 ships to produce the number of ships that we have to deploy.
I understand. I understand. But you're not talking about ships that take 2 years to get out of dry dock, isn't that true?
Well, there are exceptions, because you know that the cruiser
so
RCOH,
then what you're
carrier
telling me
RCOH.
is that in 2024, you don't need 306 ships that are operable. You just need 306 ships somewhere, even if it takes you 2 years to get them out and get them going again. Is that what the requirements are? And I'm not trying to trick
Yes,
you.
sir.
I'm just
No.
trying to find out what the answer is.
2 parts,
Okay?
presence and response to major combat operations.
I understand both of those,
Right.
but at
So-
some point in time, there's a number. Let me just tell you why.
Yes, sir.
Admiral Locklear comes to us, and we have a lot of respect for him, just like we do all three of you. And he says, if we keep moving the direction we are, and we get down to 255 or 260 ships, we cease to be a superpower. We become a regional power. Is he correct or not correct?
I agree with him.
If he's correct, then he's talking about at some point in time 260 ships. He's not talking about 100 ships that are capable of being forwardly present. He's talking about 260 ships in the United States Navy. And my question to you is, when we look at this, and I fast forward out to 2024, and you guys are meeting over at the Pentagon somewhere, and then you're coming over here and telling Mr. Courtney, Mr. Langevin, me, the Speaker of the House, and the other members here, we need 324 ships. Are you talking about just 324 hulls somewhere, or are you talking about 324 ships that are capable of being used in the United States Navy?
Is 324 ships, well, that report refers to 306 ships.
I'm sorry, 306 ships.
Yes,
I apologize. 306 ships.
306 ships that are capable for being used in the United States Navy, some number of which are in depots, some number of which just got back from deployment and are in a surge status, some number of which are training up, getting ready to go on the next deployment. So it's an entire cycle that we have to, that's the force structure that we need to produce with today about 100 ships on deployment, or a different mix in response to a major combat operation.
If that's true, and we can look at 2024 and say we need 306 ships.
Yes, sir.
How many do we need today?
Okay, I will reflect back on the CNO's and the Commandant's testimony at their posture hearing. We need more ships. We need more ships. It's that straightforward.
But I can't do that, Mr. Secretary. I mean,
Yes,
I'm fighting for you, and you come over here and you tell me, no, we can get by with this. I need to walk into the other members of Congress and tell them, if you're telling me we're good to go, we only need 250 ships, so we need 260 ships, they're going to go with that. I need you to tell me, does the United States Navy know today how many ships they need today? You know what you need when you look out in the distance at 2024. Can you tell me how many you need today? This is 2014. This is 10 years earlier, where you don't have to have a crystal ball. You know. How many ships do you need today?
Sir, we need to produce about 100 ships deployed today, and what's happening today at today's current number of 289 ships is that the operational tempo of those ships is higher than where it needs to be. So in fact, we do have ships that are on 8-month deployments. That's starting to stress the ships materially and stressing the...
I understand. And, Mr. Secretary, I have enormous respect for you. Admirals, can y'all give me a number? I mean, does the United States Navy, if it walks over here and I have a checkbook that I can open up, can you guys tell me, you tell me you can predict out a decade from now how many ships we need. Can we predict out 12 hours from now and say this is how many ships I need tomorrow morning?
Mr. Chairman, I think there are a significant number of variables in that equation.
But there can be variables in 2024. At some point in time, I've got to be able to get my hands around some number somewhere. I can't just be saying, oh, it depends. I mean, how do you come up with a definite number a decade from now, and you can't tell me a number today? That's what I'm scratching my head and trying to figure out.
So I think what it comes down to is it comes down to understanding in determining what the number of ships that we might have to have is. The ability to assume away or assume specific variables on this particular date is a very difficult thing to do. I think Mr. Secretary is exactly right in saying it's about 100 ships deployed.
But Admiral, do you understand my frustration when you guys can come over here and give me a shipbuilding plan that Secretary of Defense is certifying saying this is how many ships I need a decade from now? And I'm just asking you a simple question. I'm not asking you to predict where China is going to be or Russia is going to be or any of those things a decade from now. I'm just saying today, when I walk over to the appropriators or anybody else and I say, this is how many ships we need, how many ships do we need? And I'm really frightened if the United States Navy can't tell me a number. I mean, be one or two off, but just give me a number somewhere.
So we don't have the luxury of telling you how many we need absent of the budget that we're dealing with and absent of the number that we've got today. So what we can describe is what the op tempo is of the force that we've got today. We can talk about the combatant commander's demands and what it's taken to meet those.
Mr. Stackley, when the testimony we have from admirals that we respect enormously says if we meet the combatant commander's requirements, we would need 400 to 500 ships in our Navy. So we take that off the table. And what we're getting at, we're not appropriators, we're authorizers. I need you to tell me how many we need so I can go fight and say this is how many ships we need. If the United States Navy doesn't even know how many ships you need today, how in the world can we fight for you to get those numbers? And how can I, with a straight face, go to the American people and say, wait a minute, we know a decade from now how many we're going to need. We just don't know how many we need today. I mean, I just don't understand that. Y'all have got to help me with that.
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to the posture hearing because I think both the CNO and the Commandant were very clear. We'd like to have 50 amphibious ships today to answer all the demands. Those are workhorse ships. We don't have 50. We have 29. And our plan is to build up to 33 because that's what we can afford. Now, I don't know if that is a requirement, what we need today, but when we look at all the tasking that we would choose to fill if we did not have a constraint in terms of what the force structure is today, what our budgets are today, we'd be a much larger Navy.
I understand that, Mr. Secretary, but can you just appreciate a little bit of my frustration when I'm just looking at you guys who I trust, who I respect? I'm saying you guys think, you plan, you do strategies over there. At some point in time, do you not ever say, this is how many ships we need in the United States Navy, and we're short, or we have more than we need?
I would tell you that we need about 300 ships.
Okay. Now, if we need 300 ships, that what I wanted, and I'll take that, okay?
That's the best number that we've got.
It's okay. Be off some. But then when I look at this shipbuilding plan says today's battle force count is 289. Fair?
Yes, sir.
And it says that, but then on the back, it has that based on the accounting rules we've used for a decade or more.
283.
All right, what's this 274 figure in here? Look at the back. I don't know if you have the 30-year shipbuilding plan. If not, I'll have it brought to you.
Today with we have 6 ships in the ship count that a year ago were not in the ship count.
Okay, six ships more.
Yes, sir.
And if you take the cruisers out, I'm looking, it says fiscal year 15, it says total naval force inventory, and there's a figure of 274. Where does that come from? And maybe, Andrew. I'm just trying to understand.
Yes, sir.
You see where I'm at least referencing?
Yes, sir.
And explain that. This is your plan. I'm just reading it. So
Okay. So I'm in 2000, the numbers I'm quoting you are 2014, today's numbers.
okay.
What happens over the next year is we decommission a large number of frigates, which is identified earlier on in the
Okay, so it
report.
gets worse then. So next year, instead of 289 or something, based on the previous count, I'd be at 274 ships. Fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going down, and you say I need 300 ships. Admiral Locklear is warning us that if we get to 260, we become a regional power, and you agreed with that, and you say next year we'll be down to 274. I'm getting scared that I'm heading in the wrong direction. I'm heading closer to 260 than I am to 300. And then here's my question. Our plan for modernization of these cruisers would require that 2 of them actually be fully modernized next year in FY15. That's our plan. That's the House plan.
Yes, sir.
So we know we'd have 2 more cruisers at the end of next year. Your plan would not require any be modernized, fully modernized next year. So my question to you is, do we have any contingency plan, Admirals, maybe you can address this, anywhere on the globe where we say that when we count the number of ships we need, that we have 2 years to get those ships out and get them over for that operational plan that we would have?
The answer is no for major combat operations. But when you look at the requirement for our force, the numbers driver is presence.
Gotcha.
Okay.
But here's my worry, and I'm just going
Yes,
to
sir.
end it on this. I worry because today, first of all, let me compliment you on at least heeding what Congress has said about our aircraft carrier and putting the money to do that. And thank you guys for doing that. I think that's important for us to do. Secondly, though, what I walk away with today, enormous respect for you guys. You know that. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just trying to get my hands around a fight because I believe that over the next decade or two, so goes the United States Navy, so goes the national defense of this country. And when I'm looking at you, who I respect enormously, all 3 of you, and you say we need 300 ships, and then I wave this plan around that says, look, this is what we're going to have. We're going to have 306 ships in 2024. But all of us, everyone in this room knows there is no money to build all these ships over that time period, that we will have about a $4 billion shortfall each year. Then I put that aside, and then I ask you this. I said we need 300 ships, based on what you said, and I do not doubt your word. But I'm heading next year down to 274, based on the way we've always counted them. And Admiral Locklear is warning me, if I get to 260, I become a regional power. Do you see why that makes me nervous? And I'm not interested in coming out and settling and telling the American people what our budget says we have to get to. I'm more interested in knowing what we have to have so I can go fight for that on the House floor. And then the last thing I'll just tell you is every one of these operational plans we have, when we look at the ships we need and what we have, none of them give us 2 years to go pull these ships out of dry dock and get them manned up to do it. And so that's the frustration we have. And I come back to what Mr. Courtney said. When y'all came in here last year and said you just wanted to dismantle these 7 ships, if we had not stepped up and done what we did, those ships would be gone. And I fear the same thing's going to happen with these cruisers. If we don't step up to the plate, at least I know with our plan we'll have 2 of them next year that'll be modernized. And then I hope Congress will step up to the plate and get the money to do them, because we need those ships in the United States Navy. And I've said this before, and I'll end on this. I don't think this is a phased modernization plan. I think it's a phased euthanasia plan, because I think when those ships go into dry dock, we have no guarantee that they're ever going to be coming back. But with that, I'm going to let each of the 3 of you have the final word on whatever you want to say, and thank you guys for your service to the country, and thanks for being over here. And Mr. Secretary, we'll start with you.
Yes, sir. Let me start by simply stating that neither the phased modernization plan nor the prior 2 years when the Navy walked over proposals to decommission the cruisers are done as a preference. Those are done facing the realities of where we are with the budget. And it's not something that we can overlook as we put together our program. And so we have to take the resources that we've got, and strike the right balances between our requirements, the funding that we have, and then lay it before Congress. Now, in every scenario, we've described that we need more ships. So there's no debate here on that. And the report that we delivered to Congress that lays out not just the force structure that we need and the plan to build it, but lays out the budget requirements for that. That's sending a very clear signal to Congress and to the public that in order to meet our 306 ship requirements, the funding that's needed greatly exceeds what we have had for the past 20 years. And we can't march up to it slowly and wait until the fit-up arrives when Ohio replacement program is ongoing at the same time the carrier recapitalization right on down the line, and then deal with the problem. We're identifying this problem years in advance so that we collectively have the opportunity to work on it. The 306 ship plan is under great budget stress. One of your concerns and one of your comments, and we take it on board, is that don't allow the budget to dictate what your requirements are. Well, in fact, the budget that we've submitted to the Hill, the 2015 through 2019 budget, goes right by the Budget Control Act. It doesn't disregard it entirely, but it doesn't allow ourselves to be constrained. So what we've tried to do is put Budget Control Act aside, but then responsibly try to arrive at what is the minimum funding requirement beyond the BCA that meets a measure of capability that we've got to have to support the defense strategy. So we're trying to, again, strike that right balance without being constrained just by the BCA, but then not just submitting a budget that is beyond all reach. And maybe we don't have it exactly right, but we're trying to hit that balance. Our concern is not just the challenge associated in those out years. Our concern is sequestration, because the plan that we've just laid out that we're critiquing here and the concerns that are being raised, those are only exacerbated if in 2016 we show up with the same budget that we told you we're going to come forward with this past year and it gets sequestered. It just compounds the problem. So we're trying to articulate what our requirements are. It's about 306 ships. We've been consistent for the last several years in terms of the mix of ships and what the budget requirement is in terms of new construction, and in this case in terms of modernization. And we're trying to do the best government that we can in terms of responsibly managing the resources that we've got to produce that amount of warfighting capability. We might not have it exactly right, but what I am confident of, and I am sure of, is if in the end we do keep those cruisers, those 11 cruisers, in an operation and sustainment fashion and continue to deploy them to meet the demands of today, and we have to live inside of a sequestered budget or otherwise, we're going to have less resources available to recapitalize our fleet because it will become a zero-sum game. So I entirely agree with you in terms of identify the requirement, identify the budget needed to requirement, give Congress the ability to go in and fight for it. And we're there with you in that fight. But we also have to be prepared to address the impacts of living under a BCA, and we can't wait until we're in the middle of that scenario to then start to address it. We've done the best we can to lay out a balance. It's above BCA, a balance in terms of requirements and resources to get us to that 306 ship Navy. It is not perfect. It's not where we want to be, but we're trying to strike that right balance, not just for the taxpayer, but for the warfighter.
Mr. Secretary, you're a good man. You got a tough job, hard job. We want to work with you, and we want to help you on that. At the end of the day, we want to get you where you need to be, even if it's not where you want to be. So thanks for all you do. And Admiral?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. In the execution of my responsibilities as the Director of Surface Warfare Division, one of the things that's front and center in my brain is that Carrier Strike Group commander that's going to be deploying in the late 20s and into the 30s timeframe. I had the honor and the privilege back in the 2009 to 11 timeframe to command 2 Carrier Strike Groups out of San Diego, California. I came to rely heavily on all of my warfare area commanders, and especially on my air defense commander that was assigned on the USS Chancellorsville and was assigned on the USS Mobile Bay. I think about the men and women that we're going to be deploying at that time frame, and I think about the capabilities that we must deliver. As I sat down with the team in N96 to look at how we could take what had changed, as Secretary Stackley talked about, in garnering in generating savings in the cost to own and utilizing the money that was put into the SMOSA fund. I wanted to figure out how we could best get through the 20s and into the 30s and take care of those strike group commanders that are going to be deploying at that period of time. The purpose-built air defense commander ships that we have today, upgraded and modernized, will deliver the capability that those individuals need in order to be able to do the nation's bidding at that time. This is not a perfect plan, as Secretary Stackley said, but it is a plan that I think we can live with, I think we can stick to it, and I think we can execute it. These are superb ships today, and they'll be superb ships in the future. And I look forward to working the plan and to ensuring that we have the funds and the fortitude in order to continue to press forward with that.
Admiral, thanks for being there. We appreciate all that you do and the men and women that serve under you. Admiral?
Chairman Forbes, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you again for allowing me to appear today before you. Regarding our Navy surface ship program, C-21 is committed to the efficient planning and successful execution of our critical modernization programs. This will help ensure, as Admiral Rowden says, that our sailors have the required capabilities to meet the operational commitments. Force structure, ship count, and budget discussions aside, what I hope in the plan that we have presented in the PB-15 budget demonstrates our commitment to the CG Mod program and communicates some level of comfort that we're committed to executing. I think what's important to note there is that our current plan brings all these ships into the HM&E avail in the first 3 years of the program, demonstrating commitment, buying the service life of those ships up front so that we know they can go the distance, and makes us able to pull them back into service more quickly, and again demonstrates our commitment. My biggest challenge as the guy who has to execute whatever program is eventually approved is the uncertainty and the churn, and that's definitely my most difficult challenge. If I can lock down a plan in advance, I know I have the team, I have the processes, I have the discipline. I think the Navy has proven through the Aegis programs, cruisers and destroyers, and our associated modernization programs that they're very strong programs, very successful. And if I can lock down a plan, I can execute it. That's all I have, sir. Thank you very much.
Admiral, thank you. And gentlemen, thank you so much for all that you do for our country. Thanks for your patience in being here with us. And Joe, Jim, if that, we're adjourned.